Beware the yeast of the Pharisees. That is what Jesus is said to have spoken when he preached to the multitudes. At least the author of Luke chapter 12, verse 1, that's what they said. This book, the Bible, Hebrew Bible and New Testament, it engenders feelings all the way from love to all the way at the other end of the spectrum to hate. I have really come to love the New Testament, not from the concept that this is the Word of God. No, I've come to love it from the understanding that this is first century Jewish writers who are writing about their lives, their culture, their beliefs. And we get to analyze the words that they use and what it meant for them back in their time. And then we get to extrapolate that out and see, does it have any application for us here in the 21st century? That's what this is about. Beware the yeast of the Pharisees. Why do we care about this? Because there's some juiciness here that I'm going to unpack for us. The juiciness is that scholars say Pharisees, the word meant separated ones. And they're correct because the Pharisees were separated. They were a religious sect. They were the priest sect during the first century. They were the ones who did all of the rituals and atonement for the Jewish people to be in God's grace. They were separated because they adhered to these strict purity laws. And so they didn't want anyone to touch them because it could defile them. Because in their mind, they needed to be pure to do these rituals to appease this God. Separated ones. They enjoyed their position. They were leaders in the community. They were looked up to and admired. And they really enforced the laws with strictness, so much that it became a burden for the Jewish people. So, Pharisees. All right. They really had an investment in how they looked on the outside. And Jesus knew this about them. He knew that they loved being seen as the authority of God's law. And so he called them out once. You know, we call people out. They did it back then, we do it now. So he called them out, and you can find this in Matthew 23, verses 25 and 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like the whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they are full of the bones of the dead and all kinds of filth. Isn't that really descriptive? Couldn't you see that? This is literature. This is great literature. And that's one of the reasons that I do enjoy it so much. So it's beware the yeast of the Pharisees. Yeast, what an interesting word to use. Yeast, when it's added to something, it changes what it was originally. Yeast changes things on a molecular level. So if we add yeast to dough, it rises and becomes bread. If we add yeast to hops and it ferments, it becomes beer. So it's changing that on a molecular level. So we're talking about the roles of the Pharisees. They're invested in their roles. Are you invested in your roles? Do you feel accomplished, successful, important by the roles that you perform? Are they how you show up in the world? Is this what you really came here in this incarnation to be? That role? Those roles? Do you ever feel a sense of maybe shame or disappointment or failure because you are not living up to the expectations of others or of yourself? In our culture, we use roles an awful lot to define our worth. And what I'm asking you to do is to look at, who are you if you let go of your roles? Who are you if you let go of your roles? You know, when we came in this world, we knew the truth of what we are, but we may have forgotten because we focused on the things that we have been indoctrinated to be or to do. Our need to belong is so important to us that sometimes we shift the truth of what we are. So this need is really tribal. That need, that sense of belonging, that sense of we're part of. And we kind of bend ourselves all around in different ways to be that. This is a book, The Kingdom Within, by John Sanford. Really great book. It kind of looks at the parables and breaks it down into a metaphysical way. Some of it is a little bit on the traditional side, but you can kind of read through it to find the pearls. So here we are, the mask. The mask is the person we pretend to be, the false outer personality which we turn to the world, but which is contradicted from within. The mask is that which conceals our real thoughts and feelings, and which we come to use so habitually as a way to hide from others and ourselves that we become unaware we have assumed it. That's very difficult to read through a mask. One of the challenges, you know. So this mask that we have, I can remember early in way back in the days, when I thought that my purpose was to be a virtuous Christian woman. And so I had an idea of what that looked like. It would mean that I would be pious. I'm getting some water. It means that, thank you, I would never curse. See, you know, I didn't do very well there. It means that there would be no smoking, no drugs, no drinking. There would be no sex out of wedlock. And if we were married, then it would be devout sex, whatever that means, right? I would love all my brothers and sisters, and I would give to those in need. Now, I've got to tell you, that ideology, it's unreachable. It was unreachable for me to be whatever that Christian virtuous woman was supposed to look like from my Christian framework. So, you know how I felt? Like a failure, like a fraud, like a fake. Oh my God, if they really knew what I was thinking and doing, it would be a scandal. So imagine that weight, showing up in the world that way. And I'm sharing that with you because I'm wondering, do you show up in the world that way? In your need to belong or be perceived a certain way by your friends, your families, your coworkers, do you detract from the truth of who you are? Do you detract from the truth of who you are? Do you have your activities divided up into public versus private? Visible versus unseen? Because you know, the kingdom within, there is no division. That's not how it works. So I remember with this as well, when I talk about being what our parents and our families want us to be. So I'm probably around the age of 12 and really bouncy and excited, very different than how I am now. And my mom said, "You need to use your indoor voice." Oh, the indoor voice. So really what that meant is I was too loud. And what she wanted her friends to see when they saw her children was well-mannered, cultured, behaved children. That's what she wanted to see. So there was the mask. And I have to tell you, I then put on that mask of being reserved for a long, long time. And I couldn't understand why people didn't like me. I couldn't understand why I wasn't connecting, why I wasn't having these deep relationships, because I had this reserved British posh mask on. Not my truth. John Sanford also writes about this. He says, "The kingdom requires a depth morality which penetrates through our outer shell of a man to his heart. This heart of man is a synonym for the unconscious. It is when we consciously accept the inner world that the possibility for wholeness emerges." So this really is about embracing all of us. I titled this talk, "Only the Shadow Knows," right? Some of you from the old school, that used to be like a radio show that would come on and everyone would be glued to the radio to hear about the next segment. Only the shadow knows. Only the shadow knows. What I'm talking about is all of our aspects are necessary, the light and the shadow. The things that we think are wonderful, as well as the things that we think are unworthy, unlovable, not of good. Together, all of that makes the whole. All of that makes the whole. So for me, what I learned is that loudness is really my exuberance and joy in the world. And I need that so that I don't take my life so seriously. I don't take me so seriously. So our purpose here is to find the kingdom within. Earlier I talked about the yeast and how that yeast permeates and changes the substance. This happens as well when we only use our false self. When we keep hiding things, it permeates. When we keep hiding those shadow things, it permeates. And that false self, there is no way for that to find the kingdom within. It's really impossible. So we really need to just allow ourselves to embrace and love both. Both the light, the things that we love about ourselves, and the things that we need to learn to love about ourselves. Because that's all of us. Now, when I was in that Christian virtuous woman framework, I got to tell you, as I hid things and I suppressed things, that image of what I was projected out. So you know, every time I saw someone doing something that I thought was unholy, I'd be the first one to judge them. Why? Because I'm judging myself. Because I'm judging myself. We hear frequently in the news about some really weird behavior of people. And here's my thought on that. How do I make sense of that, right? I think it's because of the suppression of the shadow side. I think people get so invested in their roles that they deny the truth of what they are. So we'll hear about the priest or the minister who has an affair with someone else because they're invested in being that holy minister, that holy priest. We hear about that perfect teacher who has an affair with a young child. Molestation really is what that is, right? Because once again, she's in that role of being the perfect teacher. And in both of those cases, they've denied that they are sexual human beings. We hear about the child who all of a sudden will go on this rampage, right? Shooting everyone in schools. I think it's because they can no longer be the role that they are forced into of being that gifted, bright child out in the world. And they're not measuring up. And if that's their only role, if that's what they think that's all they are, that they have been trained to be, they've been indoctrinated to become, then when people are doing better than them in school, when they're not understanding what's happening with whatever the subject is, that's a death. That feels like death for them. We are involved in our roles, and we forget the truth of what we are, that we are divine beings, that nothing is bad. Nothing inside of us is bad. We just need to love it. Because until we love it, it's going to be acting up all kinds of ways. And that's the truth of it. I am going to read this from another author that I like. His name is Paul Selig, and he's written a book. He's written several books, but this book that I'm going to quote is from I Am Word. To manifest the self as the Christed self requires this mask that each of you wears, this false self that has said to you, I cannot be as my Christed self or my divinity or my light. This mask, it must be allowed to fall apart and dismantle once and for all. Dismantle once and for all. So as I come to the end of this talk, I'm reminding you that the kingdom is within each of us. You don't have to go searching. You don't have to find the latest guru. You don't have to find the coolest minister. You don't have to find a new religion and a new way of life. The kingdom is within you. You are the sacred temples. You are the sacred temples. And this is our time. This is our time to peel back the layers, to look at all that's in us that is of love. Because once we love that shadow, the thing that we fear about ourselves, that we felt that we needed the letter of the law to keep in check, will no longer be needed because it will be disempowered. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is your time to see your truth. Embrace your shadow. See what magnificent people you are. I see you. I see the light and I see the shadow. And both are holy. Thank you.